Let's see what the news has in store for us this week. So, the top UK news stories for the past 7 days. Golders Green stabbings and terror classification. Guido Fawkes reported early on the 2 people stabbed in Golders Green, highlighting political and community reactions. Coverage focused on the terror-related classification and implications for London's security posture. I haven't seen anything about this on the social media, but 2 people being stabbed in Golders Green is obviously not a great thing at all. And the terror classification, knife crime is increasing in our capital. I haven't heard anything about it increasing in other areas, but it seems to be kind of kicking off in London. I'm not sure whether the 2 people survived. I would imagine they did, otherwise Copilot will have mentioned that. However, that's not so good at all. Point 2, political pressure on Keir Starmer and Labour turmoil. Guido Fawkes and Byline Scotland covered internal Labour tensions, including Starmer accused of losing control of his party after failing to suspend rebels. Commentary on scandals, sackings and party discipline issues. Reform Scotland analysis on political alternatives. So that's all come from News Now. When it comes to Starmer, he threatened his backbenchers, the people who sit behind him in the House of Commons. He threatened them and basically told them that they couldn't vote to have him brought up in front of there's a parliamentary kind of board, I think, and the House of Commons were voting on whether he should be pulled up over his conduct, and the mostly Labour party declined to have him pulled up and brought in front of the parliamentary board. So he trudges on, unfortunately. He's not resigned. I predicted that he would resign. I predicted this last year, that he would resign by mid this year, and we're creeping closer to mid this year. So we'll see. We'll see whether my prediction comes true or not. Russian influence and alleged plots in the UK. Metro.co.uk, non-mainstream, reported that Ukrainians were allegedly ordered via a Russian Telegram account to set fire to Starmer's home. Now, this is very interesting because there's a trial going on at the moment. It started this week. I think it started towards the end of last week. And it's been reported that the 3 Ukrainian lads that set fire to Starmer's door and set fire to one of his cars, allegedly, because it's in court, it's going through court, so we have to say allegedly, are what is commonly known as rent boys. And the alternative media have cottoned onto this because there's a complete media blackout when it comes to mainstream media. Mainstream media aren't covering it at all. However, alternative media are. And the story that has been circulating on alternative media is Starmer's proclivities include young men, allegedly. None of this is backed up with fact. This is all alleged. And in order for that to be curtailed, this is what they've come up with. That it was Russian influence that showed these 3 Ukrainian lads, where Starmer lived in order for them to find his car and find his front door. So they're blaming it on Russia. Why does that not surprise me? Nation Cymru covered Nigel Farage being referred to a watchdog over a £5 million undeclared gift. £5 million undeclared. I haven't seen anything about that, but that's a lot of money. UK to lead NATO light naval force. iNews, paywalled but non-mainstream, reported that the UK will lead a 10-nation naval force aimed at countering Russian maritime threats. So we have Russia again. So even though it's not in the mainstream, iNews, they're reporting that this is what the UK are intending to do. I'm not sure who the 10 nations are, and I'm really not sure what the Russian maritime threats are. And I know that there are some citizens in this country that will be arguing if you can police the Russian maritime threat with a naval force, why can't you police the boats that are coming over from France as part of that naval force? Scottish politics and commentary. Bylines Scotland published political analysis on Scotland's political landscape, including critiques of Reform Scotland's proposals. Well, the bottom line for Reform is the biggest thing, I think, that's come out about what they want to do and what they don't want to do is they want to put National Health Service into the hands of insurance companies. So you will have to pay insurance for any treatments that you receive on the National Health Service. That was something that was going through on alternative media last week, I saw. So I'm not sure whether people who are looking to vote Reform next week are aware of that. Wales, HMRC payout eligibility story. Metro.co.uk highlighted that 728,000 people in the UK may be unaware they're eligible for a 2,200 HMRC payout, a story largely overlooked by mainstream outlets. Well, I'm not sure. I'm presuming HMRC covers England as well as Wales. So if it's only happening in Wales, then there must be something to do with the Welsh governance that has led to that, because they haven't mentioned it for the UK, or they haven't mentioned it for Britain. So I'm not sure about that. Crime and social issues from alternative outlets. The Mirror, tabloid, non-mainstream, reported on a newborn's death involving severe injuries, raising concerns about social services and child protection. Oh, that's horrific. That's horrific. I mean, when they say severe injuries, they're not looking at accidental. They're looking at deliberate by the sounds of things. So my heart goes out to all those that are associated with that family, because that's a terrible thing. I'm not going to read the summary table because we know it's all left, right, and centrist, and I don't like it when Copilot does that. So we're not going to go through that. But that's it from Copilot. Nothing that I'm going to look at really from a health and well-being point of view. It's political. The stabbings are horrendous. The death of that child is really pretty bad. But from a health and wellbeing point of view, not really anything I'd go into. So we'll now go to Claude. So here is a roundup of the top UK news stories from the past 7 days, according to Claude. Number one on the list, local elections looming. A referendum on Starmer with polls on the 7th of May fast approaching. Thursday's elections are widely seen as a referendum on Keir Starmer's leadership. Around 5,000 councillors across 136 local authorities in England are up for grabs, alongside Scottish Parliament and Welsh Senedd elections. The Green Party is projected to win the most London council seats, with forecasts showing them surging to around 548 seats. a massive jump, while Labour is predicted to hemorrhage hundreds of seats. Good, good. I hope they do hemorrhage hundreds of seats. They'll actually get an understanding of how this country feels about the Labour government. Like, Labour was for the working man at one point. Now Labour has become a party for the oligarchs and a dictatorship to us. Point 2, Reform UK funding scandal. So Claude's going to go into the funding scandal a little bit more deeply. US fraud links. Police are examining allegations that a Reform UK MP's Conservative leadership campaign was unlawfully funded by a US-based investor who pleaded guilty to fraud. Separately, Reform's head of policy has been found to have endorsed the extremist Great Replacement theory and named himself UK chair of a pan-European far-right alliance. Wow. There's been a lot of controversy around foreign lobbying and foreign money coming into our government in the UK. And there used to be a committee that was set up to look at lobbying from foreign countries. I mentioned to you, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, that a petition had been put through the parliamentary website to look at the influence of Israeli propaganda and lobbying on our politicians, and money changing hands. And even though it's surpassed the amount of signatures required for a debate, they've decided not to debate it. And on top of that, they have disbanded the committee, the group that looked at foreign lobbying of our politics and our politicians, because they say they don't have the funding for it. So effectively, they're taking money hand over fist. And if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I really enjoy Declassified UK as an outlet to follow. And I highly recommend following them because their reporting is spot on. It's second to none. And they've come up with a great list of money that has changed hands and gone into funding our politicians from foreign countries. So if you're interested in that, do look up Classified UK. You'll find them on their own website, but you'll also find them right the way across social media. They're on all of the platforms. So Declassified UK, worth getting into. Point 3, Labour's asylum housing plans condemned. Researchers warn that new Labour immigration reforms, including reassessing refugee status every 30 months and removing the legal duty to provide asylum support, will lead to permanent insecurity, deepen destitution, and lock out a generation from full civic rights. Campaigners from the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants described the government's direction as a sustained assault on the human rights of people seeking safety in the UK. Restore would be applauding that, because Restore would be uprooting everybody that's come through from different countries and putting them back into their own country. So they will be applauding that. The Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants, we've spoken about people that come to this country before. If we weren't interfering in the politics in their countries, then they wouldn't feel the need to leave, and they wouldn't feel the need to migrate to our country. If we are the reason for them not being able to remain in their own countries, then we do have a duty of care. From a reparation point of view, we have a duty of care. If immigrants are coming in from countries that we have nothing to do with, then possibly not so having a duty of care. So I'd have to look deeper into that if I was interested in it. But from my point of view, it's not a health and well-being topic. It's not something that I would go out of my way to kind of do a deep dive on. But I mean, it's worth keeping an eye on. And it does beg the question, why Labour are doing this now. Point 4, JCB and Reform UK, pay to play. Controversy. Byline Times reports that the promotions of JCB's flagship Pothole Pro machine followed hundreds of thousands of pounds being donated to the Reform Party. Critics are raising concerns about corporate access and political influence. JCB Pothole Pro machine. Not sure what that's about, and I probably won't look it up. Point 5, GB News figures facing political and legal scrutiny. A Byline Times investigation found that GB News presented individuals as ordinary members of the public during broadcasts without informing viewers of their political affiliations. Separately, a GB News-linked presenter is facing a police probe over allegations of attempting to assault a protester at a Republicans' overseas event during Trump's UK visit. Wow. Well, I've spoken about GB News, and I used to, if you remember, I used to watch GB News until they just became so biased in their reporting and were really quite nasty to interviewees who didn't hold their line of belief and thought. And they would talk over them and they would pressure them during interviews to come round to their way of thinking. And if the interviewee held the line, then they would just change the subject and go on to something else. And I found that really quite annoying. So it doesn't surprise me that they've presented individuals as ordinary members of the public without informing us of their political affiliations. But I don't watch GB News anymore, mainly for that reason. Point 6, UK immigration reforms face independent scrutiny. Open Democracy warns that the UK government must not create a two-tier system for trafficking victims to access support based on their country of origin. This comes amid wider criticism of the government's sweeping immigration overhaul. So this kind of goes back to what we were saying before. So the UK government must not create a two-tier system for trafficking victims to access support based on their country of origin. I'm not sure what they mean by a two-tier system, and I'm probably not going to go and look. Point 7, Orban's fall. Ripples for UK far right following Hungary's Prime Minister suffering a historic electoral defeat. Byline Times mapped out how his government's funding arm channeled hundreds of thousands of pounds into organisations at the heart of British hard right. Well, yes, Orban was toppled. Hungary have a new minister, a new prime minister, and that new prime minister is going against more or less everything that Orban kind of stood for and agreed with. Orban was very pro-Israel. This new prime minister isn't, so I would imagine that's why there's fallout over that, because the whole world is supposed to be pro-Israel. And if he's not kowtowing, and neither is Spain, there are a lot of countries that are not kowtowing and towing the line. So these stories have come from Byline Times, so worth looking at, Novara Media, Open Democracy, and the London Economic. So that was Claude. Now we'll go and have a chat with Grok. Grok's always a bit harder hitting, gives you a little bit more information. So here are the top UK news stories from Grok. Well, Grok is the only one to talk about King Charles's visit. So point one, King Charles's US state visit and UK-US relations. King Charles and Queen Camilla visited the US, including a state dinner at the White House with President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. Coverage highlighted the special relationship, with the visit coinciding with US independence commemorations. Guest lists featured high-profile figures, Supreme Court judges, media personalities, business leaders. Discussions touched on alliance strength and global tensions, with some commentary on Trump's past criticisms of UK policy. This was touted. Initially, it was there was a petition to say, do not allow the king to go to the US, because he's effectively showing favour for a regime that is committing an illegal war. So there was a petition that went up. I signed it because I didn't think that our king should go to the US. But I'm not a royalist, so I know our king has absolutely no sway or clout when it comes to our politics. That's what our government is for. So I think it's surface. I think his visit is very superficial, very on the surface. It's to save face. It's to try and garner favour, because a stately visit is quite a thing for President Trump. So I think it's just to try and paper over the cracks in the relationship more than anything else. Point two, Starmer's Brexit reset and EU alignment. Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced criticism for pushing a Brexit reset, including vows for a closer relationship with the EU, adopting aspects of EU rules and deeper ties amid economic pressures and the Iran conflict. Outlets like GB News framed this as blaming Brexit for UK woes and accelerating migration, potential food vet agreements. Commentators argued it risks sidelining Parliament and handing ammunition to Reform UK. Well, we voted to come out of the EU. The majority voted to come out. And Starmer is completely ignoring that and wants to now get back in bed with the EU. But I am going to make a prediction about the EU, because I think it's crumbling in real time. There are divisions, there are conflicts within the EU structure as it is. And if we take a little dip into that pond, I don't think it's going to be very good for us at all. And it wouldn't surprise me if Starmer is looking at the divisions in the EU at the moment and believing that when he's resigned as our Prime Minister, which he surely will do, that he may well have a position at running or being part of running the new EU, whatever that turns out to be. Because I don't think Ursula von der Leyen is going to last very much longer. She's very, very unpopular, almost as unpopular as Starmer. Point three, immigration and small boats crisis. Ongoing concerns about channel crossings, with data showing continued high numbers of irregular arrivals, including notable increases from certain regions like Yemen and Palestinian territories in prior periods. Small boats were described as a national security emergency in some analysis, with criticism of the government's smash the gangs approach and low deportation success. Reform UK and figures like Nigel Farage featured in discussions around enforcement needs. Well, if they're coming from Yemen and the Palestinian territories, we have been supporting a war. We have been supporting Israel. We have been doing flyovers from Akrotiri in Cyprus over the Palestinian territories and reporting back to Israel as to what is seen and where people are. So, as we are complicit and as we have been part of that war from the very beginning, it doesn't surprise me. And it may well be people who are displaced, but they're trying to get away from the war that we are contributing to. Point 4. Economic pressures and Iran conflict fallout. They keep lumping these together. UK growth forecasts were slashed, with warnings of rising recession risks linked to the Iran war's impact on energy prices and volatility. Starmer referenced deep damage from Brexit in this context. Broader commentary covered energy security, North Sea drilling debates, with Trump previously calling UK policy crazy, and challenges in taxing towards growth while losing high earners. So, challenges in taxing towards growth while losing high earners. We've discussed this. I am absolutely livid that they keep lumping our crisis when it comes to the energy into the war in Iran. Yes, it has had an impact. I'm not stupid. I know it's had an impact. However, it would have had less of an impact if our government decided to slash the taxes that they place upon it. If our government was looking after their citizens like they should be, then we wouldn't be having such a recession risk. Point 5. Domestic security and crime incidents. Stabbing in Golders Green, North London, involving Jewish men was declared a terrorist incident, sparking statements on anti-Semitic attacks. Unfortunately, I know that anti-Semitism is not good, but I also know that not all Jewish people are Zionists. Zionism isn't good, and it's not anti-Semitic to call what the Israelis are doing, what the Zionists are doing in Palestine, a genocide. That's not anti-Semitic. However, and this is where the unfortunately comes in, a lot of people are conflating Zionist genocidal behavior with Jewish people. And that is a massive shame. It's a massive shame, because I know a lot of Jewish people who are against what Israel are doing in the Palestinian territories. But that is what will be leading to these kinds of incidents. The misunderstanding and not realizing that you're attacking a Jewish person who's probably not a Zionist and isn't involved or doesn't even agree with what Israel is doing. So that's terrible, but it is a byproduct of their genocide and what they're doing. Other localised violence included fatal stabbings and shootings in areas like Primrose Hill and Somerstown. So they were unrelated because Grok has put them in a separate part. And separate reports covered police raids on religious groups in Crewe over abuse allegations and general street hostile crimes. Okay. Well, it's not so good. Point 6, political scandals and internal Labour tensions. Coverage of Peter Mandelson related vetting issues, with Starmer facing MP backlash. Some left leaning alternative voices highlighted internal Labour divisions, speculation around future leadership moves, and Reform UK's polling strength as an anti immigration force with broader economic crime appeals also appeared. Yep, lots of political scandals, lots. I mean, it's not just Starmer and the Manderson affair. It's the lies, the gaslighting of the citizens, the fact that 3 rent boys are are up in court for allegedly setting fire to his car and to his house. We have the man who's in charge of the National Health Service, the minister, who has been accepting money from different medical associations that he shouldn't have been doing. So there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of scandal. And this is why I firmly believe that we need to disband our government and start again. Because they think this is acceptable. They think that their actions, the lies, the corruption, the greed, is acceptable, and it's not. And I'm finding it really difficult. I'm failing to find a decent politician, a truthful politician, an honest politician. It's nigh on impossible to find. Nigh on impossible to find. Point 7, foreign policy and sovereignty notes. Or sovereignty notes. Sovereignty notes. UK reaffirmed Falkland Islands sovereignty in response to any US review suggestions tied to Iran policy differences. Broader debate on Britain losing friends and making enemies due to positioning on migration, energy, EU relations, and international conflicts. Wow. So, sovereignty notes. Well, Falkland Islands has always been part of our empire. Not that it's an empire anymore, but we've always had the Falkland Islands. So I'm really not sure what the US review suggestions were tied to Iran policies. I'm really not sure what that is. I think that's really quite strange. Other scattered stories included free speech cases, university fines overturned, energy nuclear discussions for resilience and local incidents. Independent outlets often emphasised government appeasement critiques, economic mismanagement, and broader failure as interconnected issues. Well, that doesn't surprise me. These themes reflect a mix of high-level diplomacy, domestic policy frustrations, and security concerns dominating alternative coverage. Okay, so nothing in the news over this past week, really from a health and wellbeing point of view that I will dive into. Again, it's really very political, but then it will be because we've got the local elections coming up, and more citizens are seeing just how corrupt our government is. We need to disband UK government. And on that note, that is the news for this week.